Today I'd like us to think about our identity, who we are. Let's have a look at our reading, Romans chapter 8 verses 14 to 16. For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. The Spirit you received does not make you slaves so that you live in fear again. Rather, the Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. I'd like us to focus on just one phrase from those verses. The Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship. Those two things, adoption and sonship. First, it tells us we are adopted. We're all familiar with the term, an idea of adoption. It is not a right that we deserve. It is a privilege that we receive. I have two children. They have the right to call me father or dad. No other child has that right or privilege. No matter how well I know them, or how often they may come into the house, or whatever they might do for me, they do not have that right or privilege to call me father. But if I were to adopt a child into the family, not only do they enter into a family, but they then receive the right to be able to call me dad or father. It is not a right that we deserve. It is a privilege that we receive. And that's a wonderful picture of what God has done for us in Christ. Do you see what it says in verse 15? The Spirit you received brought about your adoption. It is not something that we do or we earn or deserve. It is a work that God does for us. He calls us into relationship with himself so that we might have the privilege of being adopted into his family. It is something that God does for us. So first, we are adopted. Second, we become his sons. Now, sonship is related to the idea of adoption. In the first century, the law was that only the male son could inherit the land or the inheritance of the father. But if a father didn't have a son, well, he could adopt an adult son into his family. And two things would happen by law. One, any debts that new son had would be transferred over to the father. And the inheritance would be signed over to the new son. The debt was taken and the inheritance was given. Now again, that's a wonderful picture of what God has done for us in Christ. Christ has taken our debt. He has taken the blame for all the wrong things we have done. He has died for us. But not only does he do that, he gives us his rightful inheritance. Not something that I deserve, but a wonderful privilege that I receive. An inheritance belonging to the Father and now given to me. Now, of course, that doesn't mean it's just for male sons today. It's an illustration to say that anyone, whether male or female, man or woman, anyone who has faith in Christ receives that privilege, that title to be called sons of God. Through our faith in Christ, we have that rich inheritance, an eternal inheritance that can never perish, spoil or fade away. So we are adopted as God's children. It isn't a right that I deserve, but it is a privilege that I receive. And I become his son. I am not one who deserves it, but one who receives the inheritance because he has taken my debt. It is something that lasts forever.